Hello, 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 and welcome. Bienvenue, willkommen to episode number 18 of the Wonder of Stuff vodcast, broadcast live on Google Hangouts on air every Sunday. This is the place where you will find news, information, and commentary on science, engineering, and technology from the past week and beyond, and anything else that interests us from inside our tiny little brains. As ever, my name is John Gardner, and to help us out on this journey to knowledge, let me introduce my colleagues, Richard Smith and Ross Davidson. Say hello, chaps.
Hello, chaps.
Jolly good. So, without further ado, we'll get started. And Ross, this one is yours, I believe, and it's about living in space for a very long time.
Yeah, so this is basically something that happened on Saturday. Two Russians and an American took off from the Kazakhstan, heading to the International Space Station. And this mission, for two of them at least, they're going to spend basically a year on the space station, 342 days I think it is, which is about twice as long as what they normally spend up there. Now, the reason for this is just to do some more investigation on the effects of long-term space travel, basically. Looking forward to things like travelling to Mars, that sort of thing. So they're basically going to look at what effects it has on the human body, on the human mind, and all that sort of thing. So the sort of thing they're looking for, potential problems you have for spending a long time in weightlessness, basically. One of them is loss of bone and muscle mass, and obviously you're not fighting against gravity all the time. So apparently, after 3 to 4 months in space, it takes 2 to 3 years to regain the lost bone density. And you lose about 1% of your bone density every month. And what the astronauts do to try and combat this, you'll probably have seen it if you've seen footage from the space station before. They do resistance training, so they have basically bungee cords that they attach around them to strap them down on the running machines. And then they spend, I think it's 2 to 3 hours every day exercising. So that's one thing they're looking at. One of the other ones is what the effect of the increased radiations levels will have. Obviously, you're living outside the sort of protective magnetic field of the Earth. And a year in low Earth orbit results in a dose of radiation that's more than 10 times that of what you get on the surface of the planet. Another one that you may not be aware of is potential eyesight loss. Now, again, this is because of the weightlessness, fluid in your body, basically, it doesn't get weighed down by gravity, and what happens is you get increased pressure in your brain, and it causes your eyes to actually change shape. So eyesight loss is quite a big issue on a long space flight. Obviously, you wouldn't be too pleased if you went all the way to Mars and then got there and realised you couldn't see. One of the other things
isn't that just? But I mean. Changing the shape of presumably that's the shape of your eyeball gets elongated.
Elongated or squashed, one of the two, yeah.
So, I mean, you'd have to wear glasses. Like short-sightedness or long-sightedness.
Basically, but they don't know. It's not just that; it puts pressure on your optic nerve as well. So it may actually have more damaging effects as well.
Should have gone to Specsavers is not really.
So is that part of the muscle atrophy thing then, is it? Is it loss of muscle that causes that to happen, or is that something totally different?
No, I think that's different. I think it is just the fact that fluid and different pressure in your head, in weightlessness, you get pressure on bits that normally wouldn't have pressure. So that's something that they don't really know exactly what causes that, to be honest, but that's something they're looking into. Other effects in weightlessness, apparently, in space, you lose fluid volume in your body. Now, spending a year in space, apparently, you can lose up to 22% of your blood volume. And because of this, the heart actually, it doesn't need to work as hard as well. So the heart actually atrophies as well. So the heart is weaker because it doesn't need to be.
So where does all the fluid go?
Well, in terms of blood, I suppose your body just doesn't create as much. Again, it's going back to last week. It's because the blood carries oxygen around your body. If it's easier for the blood to go around your body because weightlessness, you're not pushing it up against gravity, you need less blood in your body to give you the oxygen you need. So your body must
basically,
just
the
produce
cells
less.
break down. The cells break down. You get rid of them in your urine, and but it doesn't create
Doesn't
the
recreate as
cells
much.
as quickly again.
And obviously, while you're in space, that's okay. But you as soon as you get back to Earth, obviously, if your heart is much weaker and you have 22% less blood, that's going to cause a lot of health problems when you get back to Earth.
I wonder if the health risks are mainly while you're there, or when you return, and it'll be interesting to know. I mean, obviously, we'll probably never know on humans because we'll never leave it that long, but it'd be interesting to know whether it would, the bone density loss would eventually,
level out
taper off, and whether that'll be okay as long as you then stayed in space indefinitely, or does it put you at just some risks because you're not involved to be in that environment, I suppose.
I would imagine that the major risk is when you actually get back to gravity, because your body then has to work so much harder. Obviously, when you go from being on the Earth's surface into space, your body's, overly sort of like fit. But the other way around, it's going to be a bit of a shock to the system.
Could you create an artificial lower gravity situation and gradually reduce people back, or is there no way?
Well, I guess it's I mean, that's an interesting one. I guess it's like when people have got the bends, they'll come up to a certain level and they stay there for a while, and then they'll bring them further up. I wonder if you can do something like that, where they can. Although I suppose
it's quite
they
difficult.
are in.
That's going to increase. That's going to increase pressure. That's the opposite, isn't it? That's going to increase pressure. So, is there an environment that's presumably high up? But I mean, that's going to be impractical, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the only thing to do would be spend some time on the moon or something. Where you've got, I don't know what gravity is there. Is there 6th or something like that?
Yeah.
Earth's gravity. Before you come back, but that's pretty impractical. I mean, perhaps if you went to Mars. Trip to Mars.
So you start off in the space station, then you have to go to the moon.
Go to the moon.
Back to Earth.
You
have to live on the moon for a full year.
Exactly, yeah. So basically, they're going to be there for a year to investigate all of this. Apparently, I was reading I think the American Scott Kelly, I think, has a twin brother as well. So I think they've got a sort of a normal version of him as well on Earth, so they can compare and contrast the effects.
Normal, non-astronaut.
Yeah, exactly.
Like immortal.
Control, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So,
but interestingly, the year-long mission is not going to be the record. The record for the longest single spaceflight in human history is actually 437 days, which was by a Russian called Valery Polyakov in 1994. He spent 14 months on Mir, and apparently when he came back, he recovered absolutely fine, and they had no. I mean, obviously, it was 20 years ago. Don't know how in-depth medical studies they had there anyway, but he was fine after a while, so he didn't experience any sort of long-term effects of spending that much time in space. And apparently, the typical Mars mission plans, the round-trip time is about 400 to 450 days. So while they're doing this to sort of, the idea being study in preparation for potential Mars missions, we do already have an example of someone spending that long in space and not having any ill effects.
Actually, that Valery Polyakov, he's quite impressive. If you look at the stats of how long he's been in space in total,
it's like 22 months or something, isn't it?
Yeah, 678 days.
Yeah.
Which is it's very impressive total. That
quite impressive.
He's been out of the Earth for that long.
So it'll be interesting to see what results come from that, and see if this is going to put any of the Mars missions on track. I think that was something Richard was going to bring up on the podcast as well. There was some news about one of the Mars missions, planned missions.
Yeah, one of the what would you call it, candidates? He's actually a professor at Trinity College. And he's got a PhD in physics and astrophysics, which is useful. But he's basically said that it's science fiction that this is going to happen, because various things to do with money, to do with the fact there's been no psychological or psychometric testing done, lots of procedural things that you would expect to be in place at this stage, partnerships and investments haven't been announced. So
is this Mars One thing?
Yeah, yeah.
This is the one that was going to be funded by a Big Brother style program or something. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, it delayed it to 2027, and the figure was 4 billion, wasn't it? But NASA estimated the cost to be 23 billion, so that's kind of what we talked about this early on in the show, didn't we? And I think we were all a little bit skeptical that this would actually happen, but it seems as though it's definitely it's not even plausible, basically.
Yeah. People were, if I remember correctly, I was reading something about some of the candidates were being told they would be more likely to go through the next round of choosing who was going to go if they funded the program, if they actually give them more money.
It sounds like it sounds like a scam.
Yeah, it's like a pyramid scheme.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is. It just sounds like a Ponzi scheme or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Well, obviously you really want to get to Mars, so cost my pound of silver.
There's lots of missions on top of the Mars one that are being talked about, isn't there?
Yeah, we went over the 4 or so different ones, I think, early on. The commercial ones, I don't think any of them are credible at this stage.
But just going back to the original story of the 2 astronauts in space, I guess it's obviously there's lots of biological things that they will test and lots of physiological things, but psychological as well. I mean, you're going to be up there with that same guy for over a year. I
mean, there's all sorts of other things as well. Apparently, taste is something that gets disrupted. So if you spend a long time in weightlessness, food starts tasting bland, which they don't understand why. They don't know whether that's a psychological thing or a physical thing, or whether it is just that the food's going off slowly or something. And then, like you say, if you're spending 450 days in a small metal station or craft, what happens if you have an argument?
Yeah, I mean I have disagreements with my other half, and I like to go upstairs and into another room and just. It's very hard when you're on a space station.
I'm just going to pop outside for a bit.
Yeah, I'm going for a spacewalk. That might be some time.
There's been a few science fiction films that have explained the idea, haven't there? That because psychologically it's a massive challenge to be not just all the practical stuff, but to be alienated from the rest of the human race. Probably, is a psychological unknown, really, isn't it? Mm-hmm. How that would affect people.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Well, that is interesting. Obviously, that's something that's. I mean, we know that they've obviously had a lot of time previous to this where they've done those type of things, but this is because of the actual single duration. It'll give them a good set of results to analyze. So we'll come back to that when they come back, or one of them's murdered the other one.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Next one is Richard's now. Now, Richard is going to talk about buzzing bees, bees and caffeine.
Yep, it's not a particularly long one, but the reason that I thought it was relevant is because some of the study has been done by Newcastle University, which of course is our local university.
Yay!
The latest research isn't by them, but basically they've laid the foundation for this. So this is about honeybees, and at Newcastle Uni, there's a neuroscientist called Geraldine White, and she's shown how caffeine put on both the flowers and on sugar solutions have boosted bee memory, so that they know after they've had the caffeine, they're able to return to the correct flower more easily. And also some other research that's been done is how the bees remember conditioned odors. So basically they've had a flower with a particular scent and then conditioned them with the caffeine to prefer that scent. The bees on caffeine learn faster, remember the conditions up to 3 days later. And they've also, University of Toronto, they've shown that if you lace the particular flowers with caffeine, the bees prefer those flowers with just the right amount of caffeine. So
So
coffee.
I just have visions of bees standing around on street corners, drinking cans of Relentless. But it is interesting though, because I mean that is it. How were they understanding that a bee had got to a flower quicker after they've
just for controls? So basically.
So there was a time.
Yeah, so they had like a default of
Right.
timed of flowers without the caffeine treatment, then gave them the caffeine treatment, and then recorded the increase in preference for those.
Did they try it with anything other than caffeine?
This is just about caffeine, but I mean, I don't know if you've seen, they've given the famous ones as the spider webs, where they've had caffeine, and it's like very, very elaborate and all over the place, and there's different substances. They give them cocaine, and it's kind of like half a job, isn't it?
The marijuana one, sort of a quarter's done, and they just went, I'll do.
Yeah.
I think the LSD one was just some crazy shapes. It was very sort of what you would expect. It was quite fun.
Yeah, marijuana, they just built a little bit, and then they like stored loads of flies, and they're just sitting there eating them. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, to find out that, well, it's kind of obvious in a way, but interesting that animals, obviously, even invertebrates, are affected by substances in ways that you kind of think are sort of uniquely human or uniquely higher animal function, but actually, like John was saying, it gives the bees a bit of a buzz.
I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting that the similar things that that humans would have a similar effect on different species.
Yeah. So the compound is fairly universal in its effect, basically. Yeah.
Are they going to try this on other animals, or would the idea be to try different drugs? What's the reason for these sort of investigations? Is it the effects of caffeine, or what affects bees?
I think, the Geraldine Wright is an insect neuroscientist, so she's looking at insects, and obviously honeybees are important agricultural animals for humans, so that's that. And commercial, I don't know about Newcastle University, but commercial companies are obviously always looking to improve this side of things. So if the caffeine can make things work more efficiently, I guess that would be an interest to them. But I don't know if you know about colony collapse disorder, which is this.
I was just going to say that. Is this some research that's come out of that?
No, I don't think so. But clearly anything that can sort of help give bees a helping hand is of a particular interest at the moment because of this colony collapse disorder, which is an interesting one. It's been going on for a long time now, and it's one where when I had the insect blog, I researched it and wrote a little bit about it, but it's just a bafflement. There's no consensus on there's some theories out there of what might be, not scientific theories, but there's some hypothesis of what might be causing this colony collapse disorder. But nobody really knows why honeybee populations are in decline.
Because it was a couple of years ago, it was all over the media, and they were postulating things like in certain types of insecticides and various things like that.
We just haven't been able to find a common link. There's
population.
There's populations in decline where the pesticide isn't, pesticide that's causing it elsewhere isn't used. So I don't think they've been able to find a single strand, so they don't know. It may be multi-factor, but yeah.
They were saying that there was also suggestions that it might have been a virus as well, or a virus.
Yeah. There is a virus that they have, and there is a pest species that they have that's also been partly responsible, but that they haven't been directly tied with CCD. So it remains to be seen. But yeah, it's still a huge problem. I think it's just that the media is interested.
Is it still going down at the rate it was?
Yeah, I think it's worse now than it's ever been, but it's just that the media's kind of stopped. You know what these things are like. You report, there's a massive crisis on the horizon, and then you never hear about it again. You think, oh, that must be okay now. No, it's not.
Yeah, it is bizarre how things just disappear out the sort of like the media just completely drops
Yeah,
it.
well, climate change is a bit like that, isn't it? That seemed to be more high profile five year ago than it is at the moment, which, it's situation's worse now. So yeah, it's a strange one.
But I don't fully think that that we understand as a population generally understand how important bees are. I mean, we think we do, but we don't really know.
Yeah.
And they are incredibly important.
Well, pollinators are massive. I mean, Ross jokingly says, "What's the point of a wasp?" And we've had this discussion before. But of course, Hymenoptera bees, wasps, and ants, bees and wasps in particular, are massively important pollen. I mean, ants are hugely important in the food chain and in other ways. But bees and wasps are. It's not honeybees because, of course, these are kind of like livestock.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? These are like hybrids and selected for, and they're outside of their native environment. But certainly native bees, from wherever in the world you are extremely important keystone species. Yeah.
I mean, people must have seen Bee Movie. See what happens in there.
But yeah, it's interesting that there's loads of interesting stuff about bees, and the reason that bees and ants and wasps are, in my opinion, particularly interesting in the insect kingdom is that they're social insects, so they live as part of a community. There's, debatably forms of hierarchy and things like that, but certainly there's sort of, altruism taken to an extreme, and individuals who work for the good of the colony rather than the good of the individual, and things like that. So they are interesting.
Absolutely. Right.
Yes, shout out to Andrea because she sent us this across. So Andrea's promoting, who we used to work with, is promoting events.
Really?
And, yeah.
Excellent.
I think that's part of our remit now is popularising that. So.
Hello, Andrea.
So
right. Okay. Well, we'll probably move on now to the last topic of this evening, which is mine. And I've entitled it "The Power of Plants." So, along with food, providing energy in the form of electricity to the whole planet is probably going to be an increasingly large issue over the coming years. Currently, we're going to have to look to renewable forms of energy to continue the insatiable need for power. So, as it stands at the moment, what have we got in terms of giving us that energy? Well, we've got the nuclears, the fission and the fusion. One of them's not too popular with the public, and the other ones, well, we haven't got a commercial fusion reactor yet. We've got the tidal power, but there's no waste for that. But as long as we still have a moon, it's pretty constant. But they're expensive to build, and actually there was something on tonight just as I was coming on Countryfile about tidal power, and you have to build big lagoons and you have to put them in the right place, and they haven't got to affect any of the marine life. So then you're back to wind turbines and photovoltaic cells, and the costs of these have dropped considerably in recent years when China started making these things. They have no direct waste products, but they are reliant on having sufficient wind or sufficient light to generate enough electricity. So what you have left is probably calls for some lateral thinking. And some scientists have said, well, what about plants? And they started going down the route of how do they generate their energy? And obviously it's photosynthesis. And they're thinking, perhaps if we can replicate photosynthesis in an artificial way, it could be a pretty decent method of electricity production. So they're going from the tack of, in other words, can we make a man-made leaf that can turn the solar energy into fuel? Now, there are people trying to do that. Caltech, California Institute of Technology, they've been inspired by photosynthesis as a topic, and they've developed what they're calling an electrically conductive film, and this film is supposed to help harness the sunlight in order to split the water and hydrogen in fuel. So this, what they're calling this device is a solar fuel generator, essentially an artificial leaf, and it's supposed to replicate the natural process of photosynthesis to convert the sunlight. Well, the plants use it to convert sunlight into water, carbon dioxide into oxygen, and the fuel in forms of carbohydrates and sugars. But this film is supposed to apply to any semiconductor surface like silicon, and the film is supposed to prevent a rust build-up, and it facilitates like the important chemical process, so that solar-driven production of fuels such as methane and hydrogen. So the how it works is they've got 2 electrodes and a membrane, and the first electrode uses the sunlight to generate oxygen, protons and electrons. The second electrode is used to recombine the protons and electrons to form hydrogen. So what you have there is oxygen and hydrogen, essentially. So they're the component parts of things like water and hydrogen peroxide, but they're also the component parts that make the Hindenburg explode. So that's what the membrane comes in for. The membrane is like a plastic film that goes in between these 2 electrodes.
Oh, well, as long as there's a plastic film there, that'll be all right then.
If I thought that when they were making the Hindenburg.
So yeah, so I mean that's what they're doing. So what do you think?
It's fascinating.
Good idea, yeah.
Is it? I mean, the whole photosynthesis thing is fascinating, and the quantum entanglement, and the fact that it's it's near instant speed, and
which we've covered before, obviously.
Yeah, which will it be making use of quantum? Oh, at this stage, it's got nothing to do with that.
No, I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think they're just trying at a much more generic level, trying to just actually to generate the hydrogen for a hydrogen fuel cell. I think that's what they're trying to do.
Right. I mean that's another element. I mean, that's not your topic, but it's another element to the whole photosynthesis things. Is that if we can work out that instant energy transfer and make use of that, I mean, the ramifications and utility for that are endless, aren't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, to be honest, when I started looking at this topic, the headline was slightly more interesting than the actual topic, because the headline was artificial photosynthesis. Now I was thinking along the lines that you were thinking. I was thinking, my God, wow, that's excellent. But I suppose they're doing little steps at the moment to try and to go down a different area to get the energy. But
I guess the efforts towards the quantum internet are going to be more or less that, aren't they, to try and instantaneous data transfer, so it's a similar endeavour.
So in terms of this sort of solar fuel, what's it called, a solar fuel cell? No.
Well, it's a solar fuel well, they're calling it a solar fuel generator. The banded things around like artificial leaf, because that's like, that'll get the media going.
What sort of like, I don't know how you measure the efficiency of that, I suppose. How much hydrogen can it create based on how much energy it gets from the sun?
Again, it's one of those research projects where they're not very big on stats. It's just a bit of a downfall for a research project. But the guy who's leading it is a professor of chemistry at Caltech called George Orgiros. Obviously, some Greek in there. He says, and this is a quote from him: what they've come up with is it enables a key process in the solar-driven production of fuels to be performed with record efficiency. Now, record efficiency.
It's just the first one.
Yeah,
it's a record.
I don't, but without any figures.
Yeah.
The previous efficiency might be like 5%,
Yeah.
and if this is 7%, it's record efficiency. Stability and effectiveness. Now, obviously, stable is important because you've got oxygen and hydrogen together. But obviously, if you put them together, you'll get water and hydrogen. So, essentially,
Because this would be an interesting thing if it was really tremendously efficient. You could have a car that runs on water. You fill your car with water. You have a solar panel on the top that cracks. There's always been rumours.
There's always been rumours that has already actually happened, and that the large oil companies had bought that idea out.
I've seen some news footage of a bloke who invented a water-powered motor, and it was a water-powered cutting machine as well. But he seemed like a bit of a crackpot to me, so I'm wary of that one. But
what's the thing about oil companies? That sounds a bit conspiracy theorist.
It does like.
Well, there has been a story, or no, I think it was only one story, but that sometime in the 20th century, some guy came up with a way of producing an engine that ran on water, and that the one of the major oil companies was interested in the idea and said, we'll give you X amount of money, we'll buy it off you, you won't be able to have anything else to do with it, and then we'll just sit on it. Because it's not within our...
Surely this would have come out, because as soon as someone else tried to invent it, then when they try and leverage that patent, it's going to be a massive media storm of, oh, hang on, I've found a way to convert this, and they're trying to suppress the free energy thing. It has happened a little bit with the whole Edison thing. Was a little bit of an attempt to do that, wasn't it? The DC versus AC thing was,
Yeah,
but I can't imagine something as universal as water. I can't imagine that wouldn't come out in the.
I've heard this particular story a few times with slight differences, but with the main facts being the same. Now that means nothing. That just means somebody's read something else from a different internet page.
I was going to say I've heard the story of Jesus of Nazareth a few times, but it's still no more credible than the first time I heard it.
Shall I spoil the ending?
No, because it's next week, and I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, it's just reruns, man. That's all you get. But so from that point of view, it's interesting. From the point of view of the fact that they're actually doing investigation into finally how a plant would try and make its energy. Mm-hmm. But I have to agree with what Richard was saying. I mean, when I first read it, I thought that they were generating the carbohydrates and the sugars that the plant would make with standard photosynthesis, and I thought the whole process was going to be sort of like an artificial, entirely plant-based photosynthesis. But what they're trying to get out is hydrogen, and what obviously the plant needs is carbohydrates and sugars. And I was wondering how the carbohydrates and sugars we would use those in an energy form. So it wasn't as interesting, I have to agree, that when I finally did read it and went, okay. But if the fuel cell is what we're going for now, certainly for powering vehicles, and as far as I know, the research is so far down the line with all the major car companies that they've got some hydrogen fuel cell, at least at prototype level, then something like this might be, because obviously what everybody needs to know is, of course, hydrogen gas isn't available on its own on Earth, so it has to be produced. So yes, it's clagged onto other molecules to form, water, etc. But it's not available on its own, so it has to be produced. So something like this might be the way that you fuel the fuel cells.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is photobiology, is it?
Photoelectrical chemical, probably. Biology? Yeah, chemistry. It's chemistry.
It is chemistry. So therefore it's physics.
It's always physics.
It's always physics. Well, essentially, I think we've run out. We haven't run out of time. We've run out of topics this evening for the first time ever. On
the subject of plants, one thing I did actually forget to say is the article that Andrea sent us that made reference to all these papers made a good point at the bottom. which is always an interesting one, I think, of the people assume that, we're talking about bees before, and they are critically important, but also they get romanticised a lot because it's seen as like they're doing a good job for the plants, and that's the commonly held view. But actually, it's like everything in nature. The plants are exploiting the flowers. The flowers are the bees are exploiting the plants. The plants are exploiting the bees, and it's just an arms race of who can exploit who the most. Do you know what I mean? It's not that they've evolved to try and make use of each other in the best way possible at the least cost to them. So it's an arms race. It's not
everything. Yeah,
and it's only mutually beneficial by, chance, so that as is anything in evolution. But it's just interesting that people like bees for this reason, that they have this fuzzy idea that fluffy idea that it's a nice friendly relationship, but of course it's not at all. But interesting that if caffeine hasn't been used by nature to keep bees hooked, you just wonder why chemicals like that haven't exploited the bees. That would be interesting. Bees hooked on some kind of drug that makes them return to that particular species of flower would be a useful adaptation for the plant, you would have thought.
What? I mean, caffeine obviously comes from coffee beans. Maybe being ignorant here. What are the natural sources of caffeine?
Well, that flower would have trace amounts in, but they haven't found any evidence that it's enough to influence the pollinators in that situation. Because I think a lot of the time, stuff like caffeine is evolved by nature to make the plant bitter to taste to herbivores, rather than the psychoactive nature of it's just an accidental byproduct, basically.
Yeah.
And marijuana, I think, is the same. The plant's basically rendered inedible by marijuana, by cannabis, and it's just a complete coincidence that lock fits that key fits the lock in our brains. Basically, that's it. They haven't evolved. It hasn't evolved to do that. It's just pure chance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if caffeine's the same actually, but I suspect it probably is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. That is that looks to be episode 18 of The Wonder of Stuff.
Did everybody see the eclipse last week?
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
yes.
I said I saw it. To be honest, the photographs that you and Richard sent me were probably the best that I've seen it, because it was very, very cloudy where I was.
Yeah. Beautiful blue sky where I was. The clouds actually came over just at the point when it was at its sort of maximum, so where you had the sort of crescent like that. So I suspect a lot of people who weren't sort of prepared and looking for it would have got quite a good view when the clouds first came over. I was talking to someone who has a friend on Facebook who actually posted a status update saying, "What's going on? It's gone really dark." And they honestly didn't know there was an eclipse happening, which I find hard to believe, but apparently so. They just thought the sky was being a bit weird.
My dad was saying there was a story about power companies having to make adjustments because of X amount is now solar, and I was thinking, I don't know how that can be, because A, it's predictable and it's going to happen, and B, it must be so insignificant. I mean, there was 93 or 94% of the sun was covered. But the actual, the length that it was covered to that extent was only a matter of minutes. So, if you had like a graph, I saw an article in the Daily Mail about this saying, they weren't sure what was going to happen. I was thinking,
the Daily Mail.
That's what my dad reads.
Overnight. Yeah, what happens overnight? Every night you lose sunlight. It's not like we run out of power. They must store it. So, I did see a graph of what the effect would be, and you had the electrical production going up, and then there was just a bit of a dip. But it wasn't, like you say, they've been predicted to the second. They know exactly when it's going to happen. They just need to turn something up slightly before it happens.
Well, I mean, this is why they've got hydroelectric power stations in Wales. Blanw Festiniog is one of them in North Wales, which they use for the spikes after EastEnders and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're predictable stuff like that, and basically there's a man-made reservoir at the top. They let it go. All the water goes down through the turbine into the lake at the bottom, and then in off-peak electricity they pump it back up. Well, they could have just used that, to be honest.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know,
it was a non-story, put it this way.
I know a little bit of a tangent fact about you losing your eyesight, because I looked it up because an account that I think the three of us all follow, but I'll not say it, but they tweet sort of space station passes and meteorological events and what have you. But anyway, he put on a tweet saying, "Don't look at the sun, you will," in capitals, "go blind." And I thought, people have said that for so long, and I've never heard someone with a reputation say it, and I thought, it cannot be right, that. It can't be right. So anyway, I decided to look it up to see, has anyone ever gone blind? So anyway, the short story is, no one's actually ever gone blind. People have had their eyesight damaged, of course. But you would never get complete blindness, because what would happen is it would just damage an area.
Yeah.
So you could get partial blindness. I'm not advocating doing it, but the reason it's particularly risky in an eclipse is that obviously it's dark, and then you can still get a significant amount of photons from that small beam of light. So what happens is obviously your eye contracts. Your eye relaxes and what's the opposite of contracts again?
Expands.
It goes to the aperture, and then when it's wide open like that, if you then get the slither of light hit it, that's when you're most at risk. So you're more at risk than when you look at the sun.
Your pupil enlarges to let more light in because it's dark.
Dilates. That's what I was looking for.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's fully dilated in the darkness, then you get that slither of light come through. Whereas if you looked at the sun under normal conditions, the ambient light would mean that people will be more constricted. So that's just something that I learned when I looked it up, just to see what the real risk is. But funny that I looked it up and then was thinking how it's very smug about it. And I was looking at the eclipse, and I came back inside and I was like, shit, I can't see.
Spotting from the back.
Which is why you sent me that photograph and said, yes, but I'm blind now.
Yeah.
But I was the only one in the whole office to make a pinhole camera, and it was just, there wasn't enough light getting through the clouds to cast any light through the pinhole. So, but I've seen it before. I have seen it before back in 2003 was the partial one, wasn't it? Last one.
Yeah.
You saw the one at Stonehenge when that was getting built, didn't you?
Hey, watch it. Jeez. Yeah, when you were still in your nappies, which was last week. Right, okay, well, we'll not prolong the agony anymore. We have run out of genuinely... The thing is, the first time ever, I always have stories just on the back burner, but today I decided to clear out my little folder that I've got full of stories, because they were, quite frankly, they were so old now, they were past history.
I think it's just...
look what happened.
But look... All three of us have picked relatively brief ones at the same time, haven't we? I think
it's true. It's true. What are the chances of that? But I'm looking at the clock, and it's 20:44, so we might actually be dead on with all our ramblings.
For once.
How did that happen? Right, okay, well, so, as always, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. If you've got any questions and topics that you would like us to cover, he says rapidly trying to find his little presets. There you go. So everybody's got that Twitter handle on the little panel at the bottom of the screen. We've also got the generic email address, wondrousstuff@gmail.com, and everybody here has access to that. We've also got our blog, which is wondrousstuff.blogspot.com, and now everybody's put their reading list on there, so that should be interesting for everybody to have a look at. And hopefully we'll try and keep it up to date as we get through more books. What you'll also find on there is the show notes for this episode and all of the other episodes. And you'll also find Richard, who has gone through every single topic in every single vodcast and put links to the exact point in the vodcast where that topic is discussed. So real hats off to him, because that must have been quite a laborious job to do. So, yes, so send stuff in, please. Just tell us out there that you're listening and watching, and if you want us to do cover any topics, or if you want to come on and discuss something, be our guest, drop us a line. Anyway, that's all for now. So what we're going to do is say goodbye. Until next time, see you, everybody.
Bye.
See ya. Bye bye.